My experience is learning from experience, and it isn't always learning the hard, it isn't always learning like, the easy way. I have learned the hard way a lot of the time, which has been my personal experience and has enabled me to grow massively. My negatives are, waking up in the morning, having enormous brain fog, not knowing where to channel my energy, a million things in my mind and not necessarily knowing where to prioritize, lack of concentration, which has always been, an enormous part of my ADHD. And then the positives very much being like being able to troubleshoot. I'm really, really good at solving problems and thinking of solutions to problems. And I'm also very quick when it comes to sort of thinking of ideas. Also, from a creative standpoint, if I'm in a room of people and we're all thinking creatively, my mind works in the maddest of ways where I think so differently to, I think, the norm. I've never been into the norm ever with anything in my life. I've never ever liked doing the normal things.
Thank you so much for clicking on this episode of The Millennial Entrepreneur. The ambition of the podcast is to show relatable stories from young entrepreneurs doing some incredible things to inspire the next generation, including you listening wherever you are. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years and the ambition has not changed. The only thing that has changed is the scale of where we want to go. We want to bring on bigger guests for you guys to show more and more relatable and inspiring stories from young entrepreneurs across the world. The majority of you guys listening haven't subscribed to the podcast yet. All you have to do is click that subscribe button wherever you're listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and that will allow us to bring on big guests and ask the questions to them that you really want to hear. And it really is that simple. So thank you again for clicking on the podcast and enjoy the episode. Hey Josh, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. I've been wanting to come have on the podcast for a long time. I know I say that about a few guests, but given that I haven't actually recorded for a long time, this is one of the first recordings I've done in 2023. You are definitely like one of the first ones I wanted to have on because of, you've been on some other podcasts. I've been following CanO Water for a while. And I think I saw you on a Sidemen video as well. And I was like, okay, this guy's everywhere. I need to get him on.
No, it's great to be here, and looking forward to telling the story.
Yeah, because it's quite funny because obviously, and you've got the product, you've got the business, but you as a founder, like you definitely do things that other founders don't, like being on Sidemen videos and doing things like that. Like, have you always been sort of a different kind of founder than other ones?
I've definitely been different, but in all honesty, all of those things like the Sidemen stuff and like a lot of the stuff that I do is actually me coming out of my comfort zone. It's actually not me in my biggest comfort zone. In all honesty, I mean, sometimes people ask me what's one of the hardest things in business, and I think that going outside of your comfort zone and doing things that are not necessarily like in your making has actually been, some of like the biggest, where I've learned some of my biggest lessons. So in all honesty, no, I that wouldn't have been me. Different, yes. I've always been I would say that I've been quite different to my peers. I've always thought differently. And I put that a lot down to sort of like me having ADHD, and my mind is thinking a million different things at any given time. So I'm definitely different for sure.
Yeah, this is the thing as well. I think with like newer founders is that there is no real conventional founder. There's no real like this is what a founder is. That's the beautiful thing as well. Like what like is what coming through. I think ADHD is one of those things as well. Especially like it used to be one of those things that in school at least I've got dyslexia as well. Like it's one of these things that people definitely look down on. And I think now, like, I would say it's more of a superpower more than anything. Like, I've seen a lot of founders that have been diagnosed with ADHD later in life, and they're kind of like proud of it. I personally work with a lot of other founders that have got ADHD, and it's like it's such a pleasure working with them in so many different ways. They come up with so many creative ideas, and it is a pleasure in a lot of different ways. Like, so there is no real conventional founder anymore, I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I really love how you put that, because there isn't a conventional founder. And I think that that was one of my biggest fears, is that would anyone sort of accept like a founder with ADHD, hadn't gone to uni, and it is an unconventional entrepreneur. And I think that that is definitely something that was, a big fear of mine. And one of the reasons, one of the things that stopped me actually in many times of going out of my comfort zone and speaking to others and sort of being fearful around being people that have a lot more experience than me, a lot more sort of academic than me. I mean, I found out that I had ADHD when I was 11 years old, quite early in life. And for me at that age, it was an enormous negativity, huge. And up until I was probably, since starting CanO Water, probably only in the last sort of 4 or 5 years have I actually seen ADHD as being a positive. And to be completely honest with you, that is mainly because of the awareness, exactly of what you just said, that people are now talking about it. And I do look at it as my biggest strength. It enables me to think differently. It also enables me to hyper um, concentrate on certain things that, when it came to CanO Water, when it comes to other sort of aspects of my life, I literally can put 1,000% into something, and I become completely and utterly obsessed with trying to make that work. So it's definitely something that
Yeah.
is a positive, but it is tough, and it's tough for me every single day still, at 32 years old, having ADHD. But in all honesty, I've learned about how to use the positives and how to sort of swerve away from the negatives, if that makes sense. I'm still learning, but
Yeah.
it's definitely it's a work in progress.
Josh, given that there's like a lot more awareness now, people are talking about it, as you say, and I know a lot of young people listening right now that are either entrepreneurs right now or looking into getting into it, and they might have just been diagnosed with ADHD or they got it, diagnosed a while ago. It's like, so like, what are the negatives that you've experienced, and what are the positives? And also, as you said, like, how do you remedy the negatives and turn them into positives?
Yeah, I think, my experience is learning from experience, and it isn't always learning it isn't always learning like, the easy way. I have learned the hard way a lot of the time, which has been my personal experience and has enabled me to grow, you know, massively. My negatives are, waking up in the morning, having enormous brain fog, not knowing where to channel my energy, a million things in my mind, and not necessarily knowing where to prioritize. Lack of concentration, which has always been, an enormous part of, my ADHD. And then the positives very much being like, being able to troubleshoot. I'm really, really good at solving problems and thinking of solutions to problems. And I'm also very quick when it comes to sort of thinking of ideas. Also, from a creative standpoint, if I'm in a room with people and we're all thinking creatively, my mind works in the maddest of ways, where I think so differently to, I think, the norm. I've never been into the norm ever with anything in my life. I've never ever liked doing the normal the normal thing. So I think that's
Mm.
something that's, I'm completely and utterly obsessed with music. Music is something that can just completely change my mood overnight.
Yeah.
So like it's one of those things that could be like this one day and then this another day, and I use music actually. I use music as a form of changing the way that I feel, which has always
Yeah.
actually been quite a. It's like a hobby, and I think for people with ADHD, a hobby is really, really important, outside of work, by the way, because I think
Yeah.
work's one
Yeah.
thing, but that can be a dangerous hobby because then you can burn out. But if you have something outside of that, I think that it's really, 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 really key to sort of keep your
Mm.
mind at bay. And yeah, it's helped me massively having a hobby.
Yeah, I would love to obviously dig down into that, but I really want to talk about CanO Water. So yeah, you said that your mind works more creatively, and one of the creative ideas was CanO Water. So where did the idea actually come from? So firstly, explain what it is, and then secondly, where did the idea come from?
For sure. So essentially, CanO Water is a still and sparkling can of water. Cans are a lot more recyclable than plastic. So yeah, it's for the viewers. I'm holding up
For the
one
YouTube
one right
viewers, there
now
you go.
for the YouTube viewers. And the reason it's in a can is because plastic is more recyclable. Cans recycle forever. You know, a big stat is that around 75% of aluminium that was produced in the 1800s is just still in circulation. So the loop is just so, you know, it's so amazing. But in all honesty, this wasn't something that that was part of my childhood or part of my life, and that's where the idea comes in because myself and my three good friends went to Thailand and on a holiday and saw how bad the plastic problem was. It
Mm,
wasn't something that we'd ever seen before. It wasn't something that we were expecting to see. It was just something that we had stumbled upon and was like, how is this possible? How is this being allowed to happen? And it was like this like hidden evil behind these brands. That's how sort of we saw it. Brands that we grew up loving and had trusted really. And
yeah,
this is another ADHD side effect. We came back and most people would just you know get on with their lives, but we became completely and utterly obsessed with trying to come up with a way of making a difference and changing this. And through doing extensive amounts of research, saw that aluminium is an incredible material that actually is recyclable, unlike plastic where it might be recycled a few times, but then it can't be recycled. And every time you recycle it, it loses its quality. Whereas aluminium
yeah.
has infinite quality. So a can could always become another can and it will never, ever, ever change. And that will be like that forever. Whereas a plastic bottle, it might be able to downgrade 10 times and then it will just get made into like a park bench. But how many park benches do we need? And then you get to the problem where like it can, with microplastics where, if it's in tires or on roads and all these things, it's like, how do you stop these microplastics getting into the ecosystem? So I think that in all honesty, we weren't environmentalists, we're not environmentalists, we're not experts within environmental studies. We just were three normal guys who basically stumbled upon something and thought, you know what, there's real opportunities here to make change. And I think that essentially that is what CanO Water is. It's a product that is giving people a more recyclable solution to try and remove plastic from the ocean.
And where is the growth of that? So you came up with the idea, and you obviously became super focused on that. And it's an incredible premise, right? Like it makes a ton of sense. Plastics, like it can't be recycled as much as aluminium. Like all those problems that you mentioned. The can looks super nice as well. It looks super clean. And I guess like what's the just so people like understand what's the sort of like growth of the business right now? Like which stores are you in? How many people are drinking it? I saw yesterday Jack Grealish from Manchester City was drinking it. Like it's a bit mad. So how what's the state of the business currently?
For sure. Do you know what? Before we go into that, I always like to tell people how we got here because I think that it's so easy to say where we are now. But I think that the important thing is to talk about like how we got here with like the blood, sweat, and tears because we
Yeah,
are in
I
some
was gonna go to that afterwards. So it's like here's
fine.
where
All
we
right,
are, and
yeah,
then
fine. Because it's funny because a lot of people, and this is something that is incredibly important to to people, young, old, whoever, anyone getting into business is everyone sees the great things like Jack Grealish holding the can and Tesco and CanO Water and Windsor Castle and all these things. But I think the important thing is to also remember how it got there. And I think that I was thinking recently around this topic about every can that you see, it got there through like this blood, sweat, and tears. It sort of it didn't just arrive on the shelf, and I think that that's something that no one really sees. And this isn't just about CanO Water. This is about loads of different brands. and loads of different, there's a team behind it that essentially is working their arse off to make it happen. But our journey was seriously scary, painful, risky, where no one really believed in the product. And we're obviously lucky now, and we're not even lucky. We've worked incredibly hard to get to get to where the brand is now. But the brand, it's so amazing to see people like Jack Grealish holding the can. I mean, it's really amazing.
So where's the business right now, like briefly? And then I really want to focus in like one of those points that you mentioned of like all the blood, sweat and tears moments where you're like people see the Jack Grealish, but they don't see behind the scenes of like what
For
we were
sure.
actually doing day to day.
Yeah. So right now the company is, you know, we are in growth. The business is in the best place that it's ever been. We've got some enormous distribution across nationally across the UK, certain parts of Europe. You can find CanO Water in a load of the major sort of supermarkets, independents. Amazon. Some people see it in their office. They might see it in their university, at school, in their fridge because their sibling or their parent brought it home from an event. It's
Mm.
sort of like, it's so amazing to see sort of like the widespread that comes from a water brand, because we all drink water. um, we all drink water. It's,
Yeah.
it's a necessity. It's a necessity in life, and I think that the tough thing about canned water is obviously it's new. It's something that people aren't used to. It's something that we'd be silly to think that everyone knows what CanO Water is, because there's plenty of people who don't. So, essentially, people are still learning about the product every day. But it definitely intrigues people. And exactly what you said before, it looks different, it looks cool.
Yeah.
And people see it and they're like, oh, what's this? And then they go into this journey of like, do I like it? Do I not like it? Oh, it tastes a bit weird, but actually it just tastes of water. I'm expecting it to be sparkling, and then after they've got through that, they're like, oh wow, this is actually a great product. And I think that's the
Yeah.
that's the journey that people go through.
Okay, so it's wonderful. You're in all these different places, supermarkets, events across Europe and the UK. So when you get to that stage, that where people might know you, and back then people wouldn't drink water out of a can, and even now it's still like a bit of a friction point, I'm guessing. So it's like you, I mean, the biggest one is like it's literally just water in a can. Like, so for people being like, should we really take you as a business seriously? So like, what were you sort of like coming up against in that sort of phase?
It was incredibly hard. It was hundreds of calls, thousands of calls. The first 3 years, me and the other two founders just making as many calls as possible, standing outside of train stations, planting CanO Water anywhere in London, at events, in people's hands, standing outside of like London Fashion Week or all these different places, just sort of trying to get CanO Water in anyone's hands, because everyone thought that it was a very stupid idea at the time, because no one really understood why. We would say, "Oh, it's a water in a can," and like in the early days, people would just be like, "What?" They just wouldn't understand it, and it's so incredible that year after year, um, I genuinely, and I witnessed it firsthand. I saw people going from like never understanding to a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and it just kept them going and going. And that's actually through the consumer. In all honesty, like the consumer being a bit more aware, whether it be them seeing a video of a turtle with a straw in its nose, or they saw something on BBC where it was David Attenborough talking about how bad the plastic problem was, or it was a family member that has always been talking about how bad plastic is. And all of these things, we're very fortunate, because in 2018 we were about 3 months away from closing CanO Water's doors. The business wasn't getting anywhere. It wasn't generating any revenue. We were building this small little brand that really no one really knew, but it was sort of generating a little bit of hype, but it wasn't really sort of getting anywhere. And it was at that point where it was like, okay, well, if this doesn't work in the next few months, we're just going to run out of money, and then that's it. And we were very, very fortunate that through serious amounts of hard work and great timing from David Attenborough doing Blue Planet, that the world sort of switched a little bit. Because if it hadn't have, we wouldn't be here today. CanO Water wouldn't have existed. I don't think that any other canned waters would exist today, which you could look at as competition, but at the same time, I look at it as opportunity, and also it's the reason we exist, because we want to inspire other brands to do the same thing. Um, and in all honesty, if we, I think that I'm really glad that we stuck it out, because I see so many amazing entrepreneurs giving up a little bit too early just because they might think it's not their time, but their time may be just around the corner. And me and my business partner, Ariel, we always used to say, like, we're on the cusp, like it's coming, and just like you know we're still on the cusp, but at the same time, we've got over these hurdles, and I think that it's just an up and down journey. Like, it
For
really is an
you,
up and down journey.
Josh, for you as a founder though, like, because so, yeah, you were saying you're like 3 months away from like literally running out of money, and like convincing the consumer is very difficult, right? Because it's like you're convincing people one at a time, whereas selling towards businesses is slightly easier. You just need to convince one business, and that's it. Like, you've got a decent amount of revenue. However, and obviously, like, the businesses that you want to sell to, they sell to customers as well. So it's like it's one of those ones. But for you as a founder, did you have any moments of doubt in those moments? Like, I mean, every founder's got them, but I feel like with you being that close to running out of money, that the feelings of doubt must have been fairly strong.
Really, really strong. I mean, for all of us, really, you know, burnout but like burning out nearly every day, deep sort of like depression and mental health sort of, bouts. You know, are we the only ones that really think that this is going to work? You know, are we flogging a dead horse? All of these things sort of, I guess, went through our mind of, maybe this isn't right. And I had experienced failure before. So for me, it was also like, oh, is this another one? After my first failure, I didn't really think that I'd ever find something again, and then I had, and then, like, it's like all of these sort of like self doubt and that imposter syndrome mentality of like, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? But at the same time, the way that we worked and the obsession that we had to be different and to still be creatively different to other competitors and other people in the industry, I really believe that our thinking different really sort of got us to the next level, and out of that, because we were always sort of challenging ourselves, and it sort of was like, we're not going to let this ship sink. Like, it's just not going to happen.
But
But
what kept you going in those moments then? Because you had those moments of doubts, mental health problem, like mental problems there, as you mentioned. Like, what actually kept you going at that point?
do you know what? I think that I say it a lot in podcasts. Like, we were so passionate. Like, I don't drink out of plastic. I haven't drank out of plastic for 7 years. I really, and so did the boys, like, we really, really believed in this. And I just think that, like, authenticity and passion, which for me is like the number one thing when it comes to a lot of like brands, is like, do you practice what you preach? Do you actually believe in your mission? If you do, don't give up. I find that a lot of the people that sort of that do give up, whether it be positive or negative, because some people give up because they have to give up. So not, I've always been about embracing failure. I think it's really, really important. I mean, like, don't bottle it is our slogan, and that isn't just around people sort of like, don't bottle it, mate. It isn't about that. It's actually like, even if you failed, it's like, get up, and you can you can do it again. But I think that passion, authenticity, and having that drive, and I always say about naivety as well. We were so young, we were like 22, 23, that it was like we were so naive. So even if people were like, "It's not going to work, guys," we were like, "Yes, it will work. You wait, we're going to make it work." And I think that that is something that is very like instrumental in CanO Water's sort of like success in the early days, is that we just wouldn't take no as an answer.
What's the biggest pushback you were getting, like from consumers, businesses, like whoever, investors?
Yeah, I don't. So it wasn't even investors. Consumers were like sort of like education is key, but once consumers get it, they they understand why. I think one of the biggest things was retailers sort of like not necessarily wanting it to happen, whether it be because they don't make as much margin with a can, and at the time like no one wants to be the first and no one wants to be the last. In all honesty, and getting that first was just really really tough, and you've got to get loads before people start to sort of you know if you can't beat them, join them type of mentality. And I think that people even now, people people are still making the decision of whether they're going to take CanO Water. And essentially, the great thing is CanO Water is in so many amazing places. It's like, and we continue to grow. And I think that's because people are seeing it places and they're like, actually, you know what? Maybe this is the future. Maybe this is. I always used to compare it to like BlackBerry to Apple. We all had a BlackBerry. We were all obsessed with our BBMs and our pins and all this malarkey. And that one, yeah, and I think one of the main things is when that one person got an Apple iPhone, you were like, why have they got that? Why have they got that? Why have they got that? And that was the innovator. That person was the innovator, and essentially over time you're like, I'm not going to an iPhone. I'm not going to an iPhone, and then like a year later you're like you're on an iPhone, and everyone's got an iPhone, and that is very similar to CanO Water. It's like it starts small, start with one person, go to 10, go to 100, go to 1,000. You know, Now we've sold over 30 million cans. It's an incredible. For me as a founder, it's so amazing to just. It started as three of us, and now it's way beyond three of us. It's an incredible brand and business. We've got 12 people that sit downstairs in our office that are easily, if not more, they're so passionate, and it's that actually excites me massively that there are other people that are passionate.
Before I wrap up the podcast, I would love to ask, because I know so many people will be listening saying, how's this brand grown so much? It's literally just water in a can. Like, how's it grown so much? So I would love to get that message from you of like, as a brand that you've grown to this level of scale, you just said 30 million cans, which is incredible. What would you say is the sort of competitive advantage that you guys have carved out for yourselves?
Yeah, I think it's think different. I think it's move with the times as well. Sort of like look at look at all different audiences, always sort of be on the ball, in different areas, whether it be in culture, even within the market. So sort of like always be ahead of the curve, I think, which CanO Water was. And as I said to you before, teamwork is enormous. We have an incredible team. So I think without the team we wouldn't be where we are. But also like authenticity and drive, because I think that is where people can't compete. Is that we were the first people to do this in the world. We've never sold a plastic bottle. We live and breathe this brand and the cause that we're fighting for. And I think that really, as a founder, I still I still believe to this day that CanO Water, when it comes to all the other brands out there, we really really sit up there as an authentic brand, because it's got nothing to do with, you know, the big profits and this and that. I mean, it does when it comes to, we're a business and we need to, obviously, we need to make money. But the number one for us is like, how can we always be doing better, and how can we always be the best?
I love that. I think that's an amazing message to actually end the podcast on. So, Josh, I loved hearing about CanO Water, and I'm sure loads of people want to follow the journey as you're going on. So, how can people stay in touch with you and CanO Water going forward?
For sure. So you can follow CanO Water at CanO Water on all forms of social media, or you can visit us at www.canowater.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming on the podcast again. And I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.